Hey everyone, Antoni here. Today I'm going to be talking about Verdi's La Traviata, which was shown last night at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. As always, I have my little program here with me, so that just in case I forget any names or if I mispronounce any names, then I have this as my guide. So, the conductor was Gerard Kosten. The production was by the late Götz Friedrich. The assistant director was Knut Zoma. The set design was by Frank Philipp Schlösmann. The costumes were by Klaus Bruns. The lights were handled by Ulrich Niepel. The regie was done by Gerlinda Pelkowski. The chorus master was Thomas Richter, and the choreographer was Klaus Beelitz. Now, let's start off with the production of this La Traviata. I have to say, I really like it. For the most part, the surroundings seem to be like of a bourgeois Parisian apartment. I mean, yes, traditionally speaking, Violetta's party is supposed to be taking place in like a fancier looking apartment, but I think the whole bourgeois apartment kind of suits better, and it kind of shows that yes, even though Violetta is a courtesan, she still has her human values, and she still is sort of like, an everyday person just like you and me. And yeah, she may be of high society, but that doesn't mean that she can flaunt all of her belongings here and there. And yeah, that's pretty much the set design all throughout. It's basically like a bourgeois apartment. And something that I like to mention, in the very first scene of the first act, we see Violetta on her deathbed, and she's like reminiscing of like her past and all of that stuff, of what's happened to her in the earlier years of her life. And then when the party starts, Anina comes in. She almost trips, and then she prepares her silken robe, and then her all of her fancy clothing here and there. And then the guests come in. The manservants basically open up the doors, and yeah, that's what I kind of find interesting. And it's not all flashy colors in terms of, the whole shading here and there. Um, the quote unquote apartment is like all painted black and with, yeah, it's nothing really fancy or pretentious. It's a, it's an apartment that's painted black all throughout, and basically it's used for like not just the party scene, but also the scene when Violetta is alone, the scene with Giorgio and Violetta, and the scene with Giorgio and Alfredo, and even for Flora's party scene. And speaking of Flora, there are times I have to wonder what the costume designer was thinking when it came to having Flora Bervois dressed up as though that she came out of some production from the Takarazuka Review. That's an all-female acting troupe in Japan, so yeah, it kind of makes me wonder why the heck is she dressed like that in the first scene? She's almost dressed like a man, but with a little bit of femininity. I mean, we see her wearing high heels after all. It's like she's almost dressed as though that she came out of the Takarazuka Review or something like that. It's almost like she came out of that type of acting troupe. Oh well, but that's just a minor nitpick. But still, and the third act, we basically see the apartment almost in shambles. I mean, the trees are cut down, and the walls, the pillars, it's like all falling apart. I think this is basically symbolizing that, well, Violetta has sold all of her belongings and she's given up everything, and now her health is failing, even worse than the first two acts, which really symbolizes something of, not just Violetta becoming penniless, but also that of her crippling health. So that kind of symbolizes something in this production of La Traviata. So overall, I pretty much have to say that, yeah, the production does follow what it was originally intended to be, but with a few twists here and there. And all I have to say is that it's excellent. It's really that excellent. There was, well, basically, there were a few deviations here and there, like during the scene with Violetta and Giorgio Germont, there are like these two young people, like either playing outside the apartment. It didn't really distract me, but a part of me tells me that maybe the young girl is supposed to be Alfredo's younger sister, who's usually unseen throughout the opera. But that's just me. But all I have to say is that the production was really, really, really well done. It was that excellent. And now let's move on to the conductor. I thought he did a really great job. There are times that the orchestra overpowers the singers, especially in the Brindisi, um, when Alfredo and Violetta were hitting that high B flat. I felt that they were underpowered because of the orchestra. So yeah, but still, he did a great job. I mean, the speed wasn't too slow, nor was it too fast. It was appropriate in certain moments where it had to be adagio, and it was appropriate in certain moments where it had to be allegro. So all I could say is that the conducting, which was done by Gerard Costin, was great. So yeah, Mr. Costin really did such a commendable job, even though at times the orchestra can be loud, but it's forgiven. Now let's move on to the singers. In the role of Violetta Valeri, we have Dinara Alieva. Now, I've watched this production with my friend Anahita, and she basically had this to say about Miss Alieva as Violetta. She did not really care for Miss Alieva's performance in that role. She thought that, yes, her voice was okay for the most part, but there were certain moments where Miss Alieva was pushing her voice, and that did not sound natural. It didn't really sound healthy for her voice. And there were times that Miss Alieva was stiff in her acting. There were times that, well, it wasn't just stiff, it was also quite tense. There was a certain tension that was holding her performance in that role. And that was sort of like the setback of Miss Alieva's performance as Violetta, in the opinion of my friend Anahita. So, yeah, she basically felt that that was the low point of the production. As for me, I thought that Miss Alieva was okay. It's not really my most favorite voice for Violetta, nor was it the worst. But usually, when I think of Violetta, I would always think that she should be sung by a dramatic coloratura soprano, someone like, Diana Damrau or Elena Mosuch. So, yeah, Miss Alieva's voice as Violetta isn't really my ideal voice for singing that role because truth of the matter is, Miss Alieva is a full lyric soprano, yet almost veering towards Spinto. So, yeah, maybe that's just why I think that she's just okay in that part. Vocally, she's okay. Sure, there are some pitfalls. Like, yes, there are times that she does push her voice, and there are times that she doesn't really like shade it properly with in terms of the softer lines. But I thought she was okay. I mean, she wasn't really that great, nor was she that terrible. She was just okay. But her acting was good, in my opinion. I thought she was able to convey the pain that Violetta had in terms of her tuberculosis and her weakening physical condition, and also that of her breakdowns here and there. You could really see that at times she's a depressed soul that basically really wants to save herself from all of this crap. At least that's how I see it. And I thought that dramatically, Miss Alieva was good. Sure, at times her voice wasn't that great. At times she ended up pushing her voice, but it's quite a small price to pay. I mean, she was able to convey Violetta's pain dramatically. So, acting wise, Miss Alieva was good. Vocally speaking, she was just okay. She could have been a lot better. I mean, I would have expected her to sing the high E flat of Sempre Libera, but that's a minor nitpick. I mean, I would always listen to the Sempre Libera for that high E flat, which in fact was interpolated. So, yes, that's all I have to say about Miss Alieva as Violetta. And now we move on to the Alfredo, who was sung by Georgi Vasilyev. I have to say this about Mr. Vasilyev. Bravo. I really, really, really like his voice. Sure, in the Brindisi, in that high B flat, he was a bit underpowered by the orchestra, but throughout the rest of the scenes, he was actually really great, vocally and theatrically. Vocally, his tone was focused and his intonation was really good all throughout. And theatrically, he was able to bring all of Alfredo's youthfulness, his passion, and at times his stubbornness. And yeah, I thought that was a really great portrayal of Alfredo Jamon. Sure, there are times that he's stubborn, but he's still quite young for his age. I mean, he's in his mid 20s, so yes, that's quite understandable. And he has this type of burning passion for Violetta that he just simply wants Violetta to understand that he loves her and he really cares for her. But at times he doesn't always understand why Violetta would do something like this, like donate and even be with Dufal for that matter. So, yes, basically what Mr. Vasilyev presented for us was an Alfredo that was full of youth, full of passion, full of occasional stubbornness, but still, he was a very passionate Alfredo and he sang and acted with all of his heart, which is a very commendable performance. I feel like he pretty much outshone Alieva's performance as Violetta, and that's pretty much saying something. So overall, I have to say that Mr. Vasilyev gave such a commendable performance as Alfredo. And now let's move on to the Giorgio Germont of the evening, Etienne Dupuis. Fun fact, I basically first encountered Mr. Dupuis at the intermission of Zauberflöte. That was that Saturday. And he was a really nice guy, so to say. And yeah, that's all I have to say. He's a very, very, very nice and charismatic guy. And now I have to say this about his singing. He was magnificent. Anahita and I really agreed that he was the huge star of the show. He was able to bring such a beautiful tone to his voice, and when he had to shade his voice in Di Provenza il Mar, it was done so gorgeously, especially with the softer lines. I mean, he shaded those so beautifully, and his tone, his intonation, absolutely well focused. There were no cracks. There were no wobbles. There were no excessive vibratos. It was a well focused tone. And not just well focused, but also virile and seductive, I might add. And as Giorgio, yes, Mr. Dupuis is quite young. He seems to pass off more as Alfredo's more mature, manlier, older brother. But yeah, that's just how I see it. I mean, Mr. Dupuis is quite a handsome fellow after all. And yes, he was able to involve himself in the drama, and you could really see how much he cares for his son, how much he comforts him in times of doubt. You could really see that he's such a wonderful person. And that's what I really felt was the high point of the evening. Mr. Dupuis' performance as Giorgio Jamon. Which reminds me, Mr. Dupuis, if you're watching this, all I have to say is that you were absolutely amazing as Giorgio Germont. I really commend your performance in that role, and I wish you all the best of your future endeavors. And with that said, I hope you continue singing, and well, I wish you well. That's all I could say. Bravo, Mr. Dupuis. You really made not just my night, but also that of my friend Anahita's night. She really loved your voice as well. She thought that you were the best performer among the entire cast. She felt like you were the number one best performer, and I completely agree with her. Thank you, Monsieur Dupuis. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. So, let's also move on to the secondary characters. Flora Beauvoir was sung by Rachel Hodge, who was the second lady in Zauberflöte. She was able to make use of her small yet vital role, and her tone was well focused. That's all I could say. Gaston was sung by Burkhard Ulrich, who on Saturday was Monostatos from Magic Flute. I thought he was able to make use of his small role. Actually, he made great use of it, and his singing, as always, was good. Not just good, but also great. And yeah, he was also a great actor. The Baron du Fall was sung by veteran baritone Linus Carlson. For a small role like Baron du Fall, I thought that Mr. Carson was able to do a very great job, and despite his somewhat old age, he was able to produce a great tone to his voice, and his singing was even all throughout. Like I said, there were no cracks, no wobbles, no vocal pitfalls here and there. It was just well produced singing. And in the role of Marquis von Aubigny, or excuse me, Marquis d'Aubigny, we have Andrew Harris. Very great singer. I could see a lot of potential in him doing a lot of bigger roles. And in the role of Anina, which was sung by Alexandra Hutton, who was Papagena from Zauberflöte that Saturday, she was able to make great use of her small role. I don't know if her almost tripping on stage was either um, on purpose or it was just a small accident, but still, it was quite hilarious seeing that, Anina is sort of in a rush trying to get Violetta all dressed up for the first scene of the first act of the opera. It was quite funny. And her singing, even though she doesn't have that much to sing, was beautiful. And it was actually a great contrast to Violetta's dramatic coloratura voice. With Anina and Alexandra Hutton in that role, she produced a light, lyric, soubretish voice, which I thought is quite appropriate for Anina since, I feel like she could be a great foil to Violetta. Violetta with her grandeur and high class life and all that, and Anina with her simple, somewhat submissive, and quite girlish and youthful quality. So, yes. And in the third act, I thought Miss Hutton really played off of Miss Alieva really well. And that's all I could say. Miss Hutton was definitely making great use of her role. And with that, I applaud her. But there are times that I have to question the director if it was really appropriate for Miss Hutton to turn her back on stage while Violetta and Alfredo were singing Parigi o Cara. It would really help if we would also see her reactions to Violetta's um, slow coming death. It would really help. I mean, it would really help if we could have just seen her crying or terrified. It would have helped to see some reactions. But still, that's just a small price to pay. I still feel that Miss Hutton was able to make great use of her small role of Anina. And in the other roles, such as um, Dr. Grenville, which was sung by Tobias Kera, he made great use of a small role like that with an even tone and a gorgeous, luxurious voice. Fun fact, he was also Sarastro in the Saturday performance of Zauberflöte. So, yes, there's a lot of potential for Mr. Kera in heavier basso roles. So, I pray for that as well. And in the other smaller roles, such as Giuseppe, who is Violetta's servant, the messenger, and Flora's servant, which were respectively sung by Paul Kaufmann, Stephen Barkey, and Holger Gerberding, I thought they were all well acted and well sung. So that's what I can say about last night's production of La Traviata. Overall, I have to say that production wise, it was excellent. It was well done. The singing, it was very good all throughout. Sure, Alieva at times had her vocal pitfalls, and she wasn't really my ideal voice for Violetta, but for what she was worth, I felt that she was able to make a good impression on Violetta. But for me and my friend Anahita, the true star of that evening's aria was Mr. Etienne Dupuis as Giorgio Germont. We both wish him well in his future endeavors from the bottom of our hearts. So, yes, that's all I can say. Last night's production of La Traviata had a great production, great singing, and it was a very great evening for not just me, but also for my dear friend Anahita. And Anahita, if you're also watching this, thank you very much for being like my being actually I'd like to say this. Thank you very much for being my friend, my very, very dear friend. And I know that you've been wanting to see La Traviata or any other opera for a while, so I hope that you've enjoyed your evening. And I hope that you also enjoyed this review as well. So, that's all the time that I have, and take care, everybody.